Hey guys, thanks a lot for tuning in. My nickname is iFacePalm, and in this episode we're going to take a closer look at the brand new Tier 8 Chinese 122 TM medium tank, which was just introduced for the 2021 Lunar Event. And during this tank review we'll be looking into whether if it's worth the grind or alternatively the gold, how its tank statistics looks. I will compare its stats against several other hard-hitting Tier 8 medium tanks, which will be followed up with an extensive armor profile rundown with focus on its weak spots and strengths. And afterwards I will take you guys alongside two, of course, very recent battles, which hopefully will give you guys a good idea of this tank in action. And to finish up, I'll do an extended sum up and my rating of this tank. Okay guys, let's get started. Okay, so what is the 122 TM all about? Is it any good? And is it worth the marathon grind or alternatively the gold? Well, the thing is that right off the bat, the tank might seem like a somewhat copy of the last marathon tank, the Soviet 274A, as it surprisingly seems to have quite a lot in common with it. But with the difference that this tank seems to be kinda super specialized, because the turret armor seems kinda epic, alongside an impressive 8 degrees of gun depression and a stunning 400 alpha damage for a medium tank. And not only that, it also receives high velocity APCR shields as standard. So it all seems to be too good to be true, right? Well, it definitely had to make its sacrifices, and they are definitely noticeable, because some of them, it's not only its sluggish mobility, the low velocity premium shells, two gigantic cupolas that can be spotted nearly from the other side of the map, and this part is not even the worst, because this tank features the worst DPM of any Tier 8 medium tank in the whole game. And the interesting question naturally becomes, does the tank's benefits outweigh the negatives, or do the negatives actually render this tank completely useless? Well, it's a bit more tricky than that, because personally I love when tank specializes, but this tank seems to take it to another level. As an example, the DPM is not the most important figure for me, but having the worst DPM of any Tier 8 medium tank in the game should definitely affect it negatively, right? And not only that, how does the rest of the tank statistics looks? And that goes especially for the hidden figures. Well, let's take a look, by this time starting out by taking a look at its brand new tank design, and afterwards continuing with a quick stats rundown with my current crew and tank setup. So when you pick up this tank, you get this red camouflage design, and definitely noticeable, you get these objects, things, arms, hands around the tank. So at least for me it looks kinda too red. It doesn't really seem to be that impressive. But luckily we can of course change the camera. Let's take a look. So for example, you can directly see here already the tank is improving in its design, and here we have it in blue, full blue color. So yeah, in general any camera looks actually better than the original red, or at least most of them. But the thing is that when you pick up this tank, you will get the option to purchase an additional 3D camera for 5,000 gold. And how does that look? Well, let's take a look. And here we go guys, 5,000 gold and you get this camera. And the funny part is that when I first saw this camera I was like, oh my god, this is just too extreme. Not only you have a part of a cow on front of your turret, but then it just seems like a tank that is definitely made for some Chinese carnival. But the funny part, to my surprise, is actually that this is a camera that actually started to grow on me, because in the beginning I was like, oh MG, what is this? But now that I have had quite a lot of games in this tank, then it's actually quite nice. But whether of course if it's worth the 5,000 gold, that I'm sure you will be way better judge of than I am. But yeah, for this tank review for you guys, I of course simply had to pick it up. Okay guys, let's continue with the stats rundown and my current crew and tank setup. So my current crew is primarily focused on brothers and arms, gun handling skills alongside view range, camouflage, and followed up with repair skills. For the equipment, I've selected a turbocharger, binoculars, and a bounty stabilizer. I will go into more details why I've selected the following equipment during this stats rundown. For the ammunition, do notice that this tank comes standard with APCR shells that each are capable of delivering 400 alpha damage for a medium tank. That is simply stunning. And not only that, you receive a very decent average penetration of 233 alongside an awesome shell velocity of 1368 meters per second. And what I really love about this combination is that it's very rare that you actually feel forced to use the premium shells, because at least for me, I really want to earn credits in my premium tanks, and this one will definitely allow you to do so. But what about when you meet the tier 9 or tier 10 tanks? Well, then this tank is capable of fitting heat shells, which I've selected 10 of, that each has a stunning average penetration of 299mm, but of course at the cost of the shell velocity of 907. And how often I'm using these shells in comparison to the APCR? Yeah, you can definitely see it of the amount of shells I have selected. And last, I've fitted 2 high explosive shells that each are capable of delivering an average damage of 515. But do notice the horrible shell velocity, only 722. For the consumables, I've selected small repair kit, small first aid kit, and improved combat rations. Okay guys, so we had an amazing 400 alpha shell for damage, 233 penetration on standard shells, and check this guys, rate of fire 3.82. Yes, that means that this tank only fires one shell every 15.71 seconds, and that is very slow. And we will especially see that when we are going to compare this tank against several other similar tanks. The tank features a gun traverse speed of 33.42 degrees and a rather amazing and surprisingly good gun depression of -8 degrees, which is definitely out of the ordinary, as the Chinese tanks seems to be more often than not equipped with a 5 degrees of gun depression. The 122 TM features an aiming time of 2.06 seconds and a beautiful gun dispersion of 0.3, which might seem simply awesome, right? Well, the thing is that these figures only tell us half of the story, because unfortunately what this tank have in common with the previous 274A Marathon tank is that the hidden figures are really bad, but there's still a gigantic playstyle difference between the 274A and the 122 TM, as the 274A just seems to be more a medium to close range vehicle, where this tank's specialization seems to be kinda long to medium range, and preferably as far away as possible. And you might directly be wondering, why do I not have a gun ram on it? And trust me, that was my first initial thought when I picked up this tank. Gun rammer is a definite must. But the thing is that with this particular tank, I don't really feel I have an option in regards of select any other equipment than these three. And you will soon see why. For the HP 1400 and for the armor 120, 80, 50 and the turret armor, check this guys, 280 for the turret armor, 140 and 70. 280, it might seem too good to be true. Yeah, but do definitely notice these two gigantic cupolas. But I must say that this particular camouflage seems to kinda make them more blend in, but they're definitely noticeable from far away. For the mobility, the tank features an engine power of 638 horsepower, which translates to a horsepower per ton of 16.9. Yeah, that's not really fast. And do keep in mind that I have the turbocharger on it. But then again, wouldn't I be able to make this tank work even without it? Well, the thing is that even with a top speed of 50 forward and 15 reverse without the turbocharger, that should be manageable, but it really just feels too sluggish. And having played the tank without and with the turbocharger, the difference is really gigantic. And in my humble opinion, it is a definite must on this particular tank, because the ground resistances are seriously horrible on this one, and that part we will see in the tank comparison, because you really want to have that reverse speed. Due to the ground resistance was so horrible, it really seemed to only reach 14 an hour, and that was definitely enough time for the enemy to retaliate. But when mounted a turbocharger, I could way more reliably hide the tank after each shot. Luckily the tank has a very decent traverse speed of 49.99, and not only that, it's a rather impressive camo figures of 33.73 when stationary and 26 when moving. And last we have the view range, 523. That might seem, hey, this is actually quite good, but this tank only has a view range of 370 base. Yes. And furthermore, as this tank just seems to be more developed for long range combat, then it just seems to make more sense to have a binocular fitted. But alternatively, because if we remove the binoculars, then we only have a view range of 418, which is far from enough, because if we fit an improved ventilation, it's just 428, and with decoded optics, it's 460. Yes, 460 is definitely not bad. For the playstyle of this tank, it kinda seems to give way more sense of picking the binoculars, as this tank's super low DPM just seems to punish you more often than not if you put yourself into situations where suddenly the DPM is a big factor. So definitely in regards of the equipment, the turbocharger is definitely a must, together with the binoculars. And for the third equipment slot, I've selected a Bounty vertical stabilizer. And you might be wondering, hey, the aiming time and dispersion looks rather awesome, right? So I could just remove the Bounty stabilizer and just add a gun rammer, right? Well, unfortunately, the hidden gun handling figures are really bad. And I tried to play this tank without the vertical stabilizer, and even at a long range, it just took too long time. So in my opinion, a vertical stabilizer, binoculars, and alongside a turbocharger are a must. And this is what I mean about that. Yes, there's several other equipments I really would love to have on this tank, but it just doesn't seem to negate the horrible DPM too much. Because if we remove the binoculars again, and then we add the gun rammer, then our damage per minute becomes nearly 1700 with a reload time of 14.14, which is still very bad. And when we remove it, it's 15.71. So it really will not make a big difference for this particular tank, because you will not be playing it close up. Because in my opinion, this tank is all about trading shots, and therefore you just seem to get so much more out of the other modules. Because even if we had the gun ram on, it will still be horrible DPM. But here at least we can get some mobility back, we can get some proper view range, so we can actually use it the way it was meant to, as a long range sniper, and of course alongside a vertical stabilizer. But how does it look when we compare against some of the other medium tanks? Well, let's take a look. Okay guys, so here we have the tank comparison where I'm comparing the 122 TM against the Object 274A, the Lansen C, CS52 list, M4A1 Revalorise, T34 and the Löwe, which I just reviewed a week ago. And not only that, why am I comparing a heavy tank against the 122 TM? Well, you will see. Of course, do notice that the T34 is of course a preferential matchmaking tank. So of course the better comparison right here are the first 4 tanks. So for the DPM, yeah, the 1371, and that is by far the worst DPM. And when we compare it here, it's just utterly horrible. 274A is just so much superior. So what about the other stats? There must be something extremely good since it's paying for it with its horrible DPM. Well, the penetration value is definitely decent. And not only that, it is the best in this comparison, alongside the amazing 400 alpha damage. Both the 274A Lansen C CS52 list features a very nice alpha damage of 320, M4A1 Rev coming close to 390 together with the T34 But is that additional 80 of alpha damage really worth this gigantic DPM sacrifice? For the shell velocity, the 122 TM featured that beautiful 1368 meter per second, which is definitely a joy to play. And 1368 is just so much better than really any tank here. Besides of course the M4A1 that has nearly 100 meter per second more, that just has that little extra shell velocity, but of course at the cost of the penetration value of 233 versus 200. So personally, if I could choose either of these guns, then I would any day select the 33mm more penetration for the cost of nearly 100 meter per second. But what about if we change to premium ammunition? Well, let's take a look. And do notice here that the 122 TM together with the M4A1 Rev and the T34 uses heat as premium, while the 274A Lansen C CS52 list and the Löwe uses APCR. And here we directly see those beautiful 299mm of penetration shells that are definitely the best here in this comparison. But of course at the cost of the shell velocity of only 907, which will definitely be a problem when firing at long range. And here with the Object 274A with its 289 pen alongside 1304 meters per second shell velocity just seems that much better. What about the gun handling? Let's take a look. So the aiming time 2.3 seemed quite good, yes, and it is the best in this comparison alongside the C52 list. And when looking at the dispersion value of 0.33 just seems so good, right? Because the only other tank that is coming close here is actually the Löwe. But there is of course a gigantic but. And this we see right here, guys. Because when moving or traversing your tank or your turret, then the figures will definitely not help you out. Because if you notice my review of the 274A I did a couple of months ago, my big critique for that particular tank was definitely those hidden figures, because these figures really remind more of a heavy tank. Because the ironic part is, the last tank I just reviewed was the Löwe, and when I started to play with the 102 TM, I just had the feeling I was actually playing with the Löwe gun. And after 2-3 games, I just had to look it up because it just seemed like a Löwe gun. And yes, it just seems to be more or less a copy of it, because it features the exact same dispersion value and very similar hidden figures, and the whole gun handling combination just alongside the horrible DPM just rendered this tank completely unusable in close combat, especially if you compare it against a tank like the CS52 list that just can take those snapshots in a fraction of a second. And even the M4A1 Rev with its 390 alpha damage gun is just way better, because when playing with the 122 TM, my mind keeps jumping between the M4A1 Rev and the Löwe. Because first of all, why am I sniping in a medium tank? And then the other thought is, why am I not just playing with an M4A1 Rev that can also be played medium to close range when needed, as it actually features a DPM that is not best in class, but is definitely superior to the 122 TM. And last for the gun handling, we have the gun depression of 8 degrees. Yes, definitely better than the standard Chinese 5 degrees, and here it places it around the middle. The interesting part here will of course be, if we fully utilize that gun depression, will it be able to hide its 2 gigantic cupolas? We're of course going to take a look at that in the Armour Profile rundown in just a few seconds. Okay, let's continue with the mobility. So forward speed 50 an hour doesn't really stand out here, and a reverse speed of 15 an hour, which is shared together with the 274A. And yeah, in my opinion, a turbocharger is a must, because you really want to improve this reverse speed. The difference between 15 or 18 km an hour reverse speed, that is just gigantic. Because yeah, even the Löwe has 15 an hour. Power to weight ratio 15.47, which is again some of the worst in this comparison. So the ground resistances should help us out. Well, unfortunately, not even here, with 1.3, 1.5 and 2.5 on soft. And do notice again the similarities the 122 TM has with the Object 274A. They both feature that exact same reverse speed, as they both feature so many similar figures. Besides just that the 122 TM is just worse, because in my 274A tank review I mentioned the lack of speed, rather frustrating, because it just felt like a heavy tank. And here with the 122 TM it just feels like a copy-paste in many ways, but with a few adjustments towards unfortunately, the slower side. And this we also see on the turret traverse. 30 degrees, yeah, even in this comparison it's lagging behind. But at least it has a rather generic tank traverse of 40 degrees. So what about its armor and health? Well, for the hull 120, 80, 50, and for the turret 280, 140, 70. Yeah, we're of course going to take a closer look at this in the armor profile rundown, because many times these stats doesn't really tell you that much. But the interesting part here is definitely when we compare it against the 2748's turret, it seems kind of godlike in many scenarios, then it just seems that much better with 280, right? And I keep remembering thinking whenever I play with the 2748 that I really want that 8 degree of gun depression to be able to fully utilize that beautiful armor that the 2748, because the 2748 just seems to work exactly when you are on that exact 6 degrees of gun depression, where if you're fighting at a 5 degree gun depression, you just seems to have lost a major part of your armor. So does that mean that the 122 TM has just fixed that? And last for the armor and health, we have the HP of 1400, which is very decent indeed, and that HP figure is shared together with the M4A1 Revalorise. And for the last figures, we have the camo values of 15.9, which places us around the middle. Very decent indeed, and we of course see that when moving. And last, when we are taking a look at the view range, then yes, we directly see here the irony of the 122 TM. Because as a tank that it seems to be built up around long range combat, it's kind of ironic that it receives the worst view range. Yeah, kind of reminds me of a lot of tank destroyers that on purpose receives that worst view range, therefore has to rely more on your team to spot the enemy vehicles. And this is also why I just feel that 10% boost of decoded optics is just not enough. Well, let's take a look at the armor profile. Okay guys, so here we have the 122 TM armor profile. Here we'll be using those 233mm of APCR shells. And let's take a look how it looks in the live view. Yeah, you directly notice what happened to all of these extra modules that were fitted all around the tank. Let's take a look again. All of these accessories that are mounted around the tank, they actually provide zero armor. As you see here, the shells will just actually fly through. So right off the bat, it might seem kinda obvious where this tank's armor is focused and where it's not. Because yeah, those two gigantic cupolas are definitely visible, but do notice that they actually have quite decent armor for a cupola, the lowest values hitting at around 160. Also do notice that the left cupola just seems to be that much more bigger and less well armored in comparison to the right, because the right cupola just seems that slightly smaller and only has 160mm of armor in this spot here. And when we take a look at the hull armor, it's actually rather decent, because it's still able to receive an effective armor of around 200, and that's the same even for its lower plate. It's not groundbreaking, but definitely if you're playing as a higher tier and angling it slightly. But if you're unable to hit either the plate or those cupolas, what about the turret? So as you can notice here guys, the turret is very well rounded, and yeah, you can imagine what will happen with a very well rounded 280mm of turret armor. Because on the far I just checked this guys, this is crazy. And when we move it closer guys, we are still getting values that are ranging between 400 to 300. Same here, and we have to get down here to even just be closer. But of course, what happens if we try to change the ammo to the 299mm? Definitely gives us a chance now. But how big is it? Well, the thing is that you are definitely not going to penetrate this thing reliably, as at best it will give you up to 40% chance of penetrating with a 299mm round, unless of course you are able of hitting it just below the gun mantle. But then again, you're most likely not going to fight this tank in close up, because if you are, you're of course just going to shoot for its hull armor. And what about if you use its impressive 8 degrees of gun depression? Well, let's take a look. And here there are definitely two things to notice. First of all, yes, you can still see those gigantic cupolas in the back. And not only that, the upper plate receives an effective armor of more than 280mm on the upper part, or around 260, and at the very lowest part 170. So the tank definitely seems to have a rather impressive turret armor, especially at long range. Okay, so what about if you try to side scrape the tank? Well, let's take a look. It definitely seems rather decent at its job, as it rather reliably will be able to either ricochet or simply absorb the shells. So as an overall, the armor is rather decent, and in some way it just reminds more of a heavy tank for some reason that features some gigantic cupolas. Okay guys, so what about its side armor? Well, let's take a look. So as the turret of course is very well angled at the beginning, then definitely the spot to go for is of course the rear part of the side turret, with values that ranges around 170, 150 and 180. And just below we have the hull that features that extra 30mm of spaced armor, and just below it 30mm less. And do of course notice, with a few exceptions, of where the tracks meets, with an effective armor of 140 due to the spaced armor, and with 120 in all the areas where we have a wheel. And from the rear around 70mm, and finishing with a 50. Seems to have some potential, especially if you play this tank at long range. Because hitting the cupolas at 400-500 meters away, that will definitely become a challenge for most tanks. And not only that, if it's side scraping or even capable of going hull down, then it seems kinda unimpenetrable. But is it? Well, let's take a look at two, of course, very recent battles I just had yesterday in the 122 TM. Okay guys, so here we are on secret line. I'm playing together with Ash in his M4A1 Rev. And here we're defending, so of course I'm thinking of directly taking the key 7 spot. That should actually be quite doable. Let's see if we can utilize that rather impressive 8 degrees of gun depression. But of course I'm hoping that we'll get some support, especially from some tank destroyers on the rear. It looks like the LKV-90 is going to join us. But definitely would be nice with some more tanks, because sometimes you just get like completely ruffle stomped when you take the location here. The enemy realizes, hey, you are just alone. Okay. Do notice the gigantic gun dispersion. It's really not made for snapshots, this tank. Must say the similarities of the gun handling with, for example, the 274A or even the super heavy Löwe heavy tank are quite surprising, to be honest. There's definitely a lot of them. I'm thinking here, like, I really don't hope they realize that it's just me with the support of the tank destroyer. You can definitely see that Ash definitely got pushed away into the city due to those. Man, there's a lot of them here, man. There's like at least 8 tanks. Can we put some side shots in? Thinking, should I go away? Should I go away? Yeah. Question is also, can I actually escape? It's now or never, to be honest. The DPM is simply, I'm unable to do anything here. Especially against so many other tanks, and as a mid-tier in this setup. Does look promising. Well, let's get away to live another day. Oh. Yeah. Penetrating the T30 hull down, that can definitely be challenging, so not even worth a shot. Just need to find some ridge lights. Ah. Keep in mind, guys, that I use a vertical stabilizer, an improved one that reduces it by 25%. So you can imagine, with not having that one fitted on this tank, it's utterly horrible gun handling. Well, let's see if we can utilize this tank on long range, as it seems to be built for. Nice 399. Whoa. Was close, I drive into our own. We'll put another. Okay. So yeah, the alpha damage is definitely good, but when I play with my list, and I don't even have a gun ram on it, I still fire a shot every 8 seconds. And that's 320. And this... Man... that was a bad shot. So is it really worth that extra 80 alpha damage? That you get such a horrible reload speed? And I must say, it's simply not. And not only that... not only that, the list can be used so effectively in pushing a line, because you could just take those amazing snapshots. And this tank just can't. A really horrific hidden figures. Yes, when it's fully aimed, yeah, then the Löwe is also good, because it features that exact same 0.33 gun dispersion. It's kind of ironic for a medium tank, if you ask me, because it's not, when I pick a medium tank, I don't really picture myself, okay, now I'm going to play like a tank destroyer and sit in the back, because then I would just pick the tank destroyer. Anyway, And directly also, like, the other comparison is, what about the M4A1 Rev? That's also very defensive, well, medium to long range tank, right? But the thing is about the M4A1 Rev is those snapshots I tried to previously, they would near to guaranteed have hit actually the tank. So I just feel that the M4A1 Rev is that much more reliable and more enjoyable because I can simply trust it more to be able to do what I wanted to do, rather than sit in the back and just hope for the scenarios to suddenly become favorable. Yeah, so far this game definitely does not looking that good. We are 7-12 behind, and HP wise we are more than, can we get us? Yeah, it looks like we're 5,000 HP behind. Okay, that guy is definitely okay, didn't heal us. Good. Hope he doesn't know how bad our DPM is. Come on, aim, yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I really want to make these shots count. I seem to often find myself aiming for that extra half one, maybe up to 2 seconds, just to be that extra certain. Okay, this is not looking good. Can we ram him? Oh, with 11 health. Okay, this is... Hello guys, how you doing? Yeah. 2,000 damage, 1,930 blocked, and 454 spotting. What to do? Let's check another. Okay guys, so here we are on Lakeville. Let's see how this goes. I think in the going for the mid section here on the 4 line. But let's see if we can utilize this tank's long range capabilities. Could look quite promising, as long as we of course get those 4 light tanks away as fast as possible. There's one of them there. Time to go extra aggressive, but there's so many of them, everyone fighting for some spotting. Youch. Can we get in a shot before we need to retreat? I can also notice that my gun has been damaged. Okay, the DPR on E7, we definitely need to get that guy away from that. We might need to put some blind shots there. That one seems to hit the rock, or the stone there, rock, yeah. Instead, just give it some enough time, which we have plenty of in this tank. And next, wow, want to slide down. Just make the EB a bit nervous, so hopefully we'll move around. It would of course be nice when our light tanks pushing a bit also. Okay, maybe our EBR is getting a bit more aggressive now, but could look promising. And our T-54 lightweight is pushing. Okay. Yeah, 384, beautiful. Okay, that was important, because that means we should be able now to get the spot here which you want to. Wow, the second flank, guys, check that, how many tanks the enemy got. That like 6 tanks, 7 now? Wow. Well, right now, at this stage, there's no really point in me getting over there, because I will, yeah, they will just drive over me. So it's more better that I will support on this flank, so hopefully our team can get into the enemy cap as fast, and we can just use this one to hopefully decap when it will very soon be needed. It's good that our whole tank division at 9 line list seem to have found the W key. Can we put in a shell on that T-71? It was a bad aim there. Should have aimed a bit more up instead of hitting those tracks. Okay, can we Which one to shoot at? This one will be easier. If of course he's not behind the rock. House, sorry. Yeah, T43. That. Why is it not shooting at us? Haven't you noticed us? Yeah, now the problem. Hey man, hey, how you doing? Next 15.71 seconds. Okay, luckily he's reloading, so that's good. It's good. Okay, now the challenging part becomes: can our team get in to the enemy cap before the enemy takes our cap? The thing is, if I was in the list, I wouldn't mind going a bit more forward there. Yeah, this looks a bit... Okay, I have to do it, man. I have to do it. Okay, 40 seconds, come here. Okay. Show it to this guy. Okay, beautiful. The enemy team apparently really wants to. I don't know what the enemy team is doing. Should just have retained the cap. Must have been some awesome decapping by our lightings. One of those two. Can we put another shield into this guy here? Man! I should have put that one in. I should have done it. Of course, we'll have a big change. That guys still have a lot of health for the next many seconds. Okay, maybe it would have actually done it. Okay, now the Bisont is pushing us. This is getting close. Man. Okay, these have gold shields now mounted for this one. 451. Who's actually seems to be a bit more heavy than we are. Do we win? Will we win? Yeah! Wow, that was close. So, the 122 TM, what do I think of it, and most importantly, is it worth the gold? Well, the thing is that this tank is not weak, and definitely has its strengths cut out for it, with an amazing turret armor and alpha damage. But for me it feels like this tank in some way has just too much in common with the previous Marathon reward tank, the Object 274A, because it just feels that this tank doesn't really have an equipment choice. The turbocharger, alongside the vertical stabilizer, is a definite must in this tank. Yes, the DPM is the worst in the game for a medium tank, and ironically therefore it doesn't hurt it that much more of not having a gun rammer fitted, as that DPM is simply beyond any form of salvation, as long as you do not seek out those close combat engagement, especially against full health enemy tanks. Then it seems to do its job rather well. But I must admit that every time I fire I just get this poking feeling in my stomach, where my mind just seems to dream of all the things I could have done in the meantime. Like, why am I not playing a tank destroyer instead? Why am I not just playing a CS52 list or a T44-100 instead? And why am I doing this to myself? And furthermore, and very ironically enough, every time I'm firing, I find myself using that extra 1.2 seconds on top to aim to be that extra certain that my shell is going to hit, because it really matters. In some way I get a similar feeling to when I play my Jagdpanzer E100 that features the reload speed of more than 20 seconds, where you know how important it is to land every single shot. So how many facepalms would I give this T8 122 TM Chinese premium medium tank? The interesting part here is that it really came down to either 2 or 3, but after I played with this tank and got a better feeling of it, then it started to feel more like a proper medium tank. Well, as proper as it now could get, meaning when fitting the right equipment to negate and remove some of its horrible weaknesses, because now it started to feel more like a decent medium to long range tank. Yes, as a hull down tank it can definitely do its job, especially when utilizing this tank at a very long range, but those 2 gigantic cupolas can be rather tricky and challenging for the enemy to hit. But in the end, I had to ask myself the question, which tank would I prefer to play? If I had to choose, for example, between the M4A1 Revalorise or the 122 TM. And in the end, I have to go with the M4A1, as it in my eyes is just that much more enjoyable to play due to its simply more versatile. Because at least for me, I want my medium tanks to be versatile. And the other thing is, with the 122 TM, I often see myself not pushing flanks, as I would have done in my CS52 list or the T44 M4A1 any other medium tank that is built for aggressive medium tank playstyle, where I will gladly spearhead through a flank and fight enemy tanks one-on-one. But in the 122 TM I simply can't. And therefore, when I had to summarize everything, then it all led me to the question, why would I pick to play this tank rather than any of my other tier 8 premium tanks, if it was not for the Chinese crew training? Yes, and the lack of answer to that question is ironically the very answer to it. Yes, why? Okay guys, let's finish up. I hope that this tank review was helpful towards your decision on whether you should pick one up from the premium shop or continue grinding it. And thanks a lot for watching guys, this was my tank review number 33. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know what you think of the Chinese 122 TM in the comments below. And as always, if you like to see more crazy content from my side, feel free to leave a like or even subscribe. It's a big thumbs up for me and I appreciate it a lot. Cheers guys, take care and see you next time.